My name is Vincent Ariola. I was born September 13, 1930. I was born in Chicago, Illinois.
What is the ethnic origin of this last name, Ariola?
It's Italian.
Italian?
Yes, my folks were from Italy in the 1920s, I believe. And they settled in the United States, in Chicago.
So tell me about your family background, parents and siblings.
I had four brothers. It's a family of 5 children, 4 boys and a girl. And were raised all in Chicago. We all went to grade school and high school. My father was a carpenter by trade, and my mother was a seamstress back in Italy. They both had a very nice education. They both can read and write. And of course, I was born in 1930, so that gives you a time of the year of the Depression in 1929.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult for my dad to get work. But he was a great man, and we survived. And we had a good education, and I had 2 brothers in World War II. One was in the Army, and he was wounded on Okinawa. My oldest brother was in the Navy, and my other brother had a sort of a little handicap, so he was not able to go into service. And I was 11 years old at the time, so I was not old enough to go in that war, otherwise I would have been in World War II. But at the age of 21, I got the greetings from the United States government to be drafted in the Army in 1951, October in 1951. That was during the Korean conflict. You notice I said conflict, not a war. I'll never forget that Truman, when he was asked, when he was president, when the people asked him about the Korean War, he says, "It is not a war. It's a police action." And so when I was drafted and sent to Fort Knox, Kentucky, which was the home of the 3rd Armored Division, which was the tank division. I was given 4 or 5 weeks of infantry training, but the balance was tanks. Trained in the M4 Sherman medium tank, which was a tank used during World War II. And I was trained for about 4 months, 5 months, and I took a leadership course to stay a little longer, if all possible, because we knew that our division would probably go to Korea. And what irked me more than anything else is that when I was on, they give you 30 days, and then you report a certain place, and then you're transferred overseas. But I felt in my heart that the people of the United States didn't recognize the military in those days, not knowing what Korea was and where it was and what are we doing. So that irked me more than anything else. But anyway, long story short, I was sent to San Francisco, California, and put on a ship that I wouldn't put a dog on, which was a Liberty ship. It's a ship that we couldn't go any lower than what we hit the middle down there. And we slept on hammocks, and we threw up just about everything, not being away from home and being on a ship. Anyway, this small ship going across the Pacific, we stopped in Hawaii, and the sailors getting off, laughing, joking, what have you, and us poor soldiers just watching the Arizona in the water in Hawaii, And anyway, get back on that ship. They let us off for an hour or so and get back on the ship. And another 5 or 6 more days to go to Japan. Unload every stitch of clothes you have with a duffel bag and just give you your basic needs that you need. And put back on the ship. Stopped at Incheon, Korea.
When did you leave for Korea from the United States?
1952, I think it was maybe April, I believe, something like that.
And then when did you arrived in Incheon in the same month, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we stopped in Japan for a day or so, and then got back on the ship and got into ship and landed in Incheon.
Were you afraid at the time when you were on the way to Korea?
I thought about it, but the point is that you try not to think about it. They tell you what to do, and you did it more or less. And being a tanker, it just you do what they tell you. So anyway, we got to our location, and I was assigned to this tank. And to this day, I don't remember my fellow members on the tank, or I was assigned to the officer in charge. He was the lead tank. I was the lieutenant in our tank. Anyway, be honest with you, I didn't think I was going to come back. I got into Korea, and it was just a flat, open land. No buildings, no nothing. And all we had was South Koreans that did some of our laundry a little bit. And finally, one day, I didn't see any South Koreans anymore. They just left them. In other words, we were going into North Korea, so they didn't want to take any South Koreans with us because we couldn't know what the difference. So what I'm saying, if we saw any Koreans on the end there, we would shoot them. You know what I'm saying? We couldn't tell the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And how many days we were going with our tank battalion. We were assigned to the 45th Infantry Division. And I don't know how many days we traveled on this road, and all there was rice paddies on both sides of the road.
Were you inside of the tank?
Oh, yes. We were actually tankers.
Mm-hmm.
Tankers.
Yeah.
There was the driver. To the right of him was the 30 caliber machine gun guy. And then we had a 50 caliber machine gun on top of the tank for anti-aircraft and what have you. And inside, it was 3 of us, 2 besides the officer.
What was your specific mission in that side of tank?
I can do both jobs. I had to be the loader, the fire, the radio man, anything that I needed. I can drive the tank. I can handle any weapons in the tank, and all that. So in case someone got hurt, I was available. Koreans or Chinese, the Russians, I understand, were supplying the North Koreans with the Russian-built tanks. And the thing I want to point out also is that when we got to where we were going, we got to Hill 266, which is called Old Baldy. I don't know if you heard that or not. Left early in the morning, and finally, sometime before dusk, before nighttime, we stopped, and our tanks were in a formation type of thing, one maybe 20 yards. And around our tanks, we had the infantry. Without infantry, the tankers were they're liable for getting blown up and everything. And to this day, this one infantry soldier, I see he was in a foxhole, and that's all I can remember of his. And what happened was that when it got dark, firing commenced. And we kept firing our 75 millimeter cannon that's on the tank there. And all of a sudden, return fire came way up there by the mountains. And to the left and to the right, and when that was happening, we had to move because if we stayed in one spot at any length of time, that second artillery thing would hit us. So far, and it got so that the officer says, "Okay, close hatches," because so we bundled down. And talking about sweating, I mean, it's like water pouring down on us. It was about over 100 degrees at the time, and firing the 75 millimeter with the shells and back and forth. It was just saturated. It's like someone threw a bucket of water on us. Anyway, after this happened for several hours, it seemed to be the quiet came over us. No more action was going on. Everything was. We opened up our hatches, and I looked up and I saw this one young infantryman. He was dead, and a lot of other infantry around us were dead. And to this day, like I say, it antagonizes me. And so then we drove and drove and drove back to where we all our tanks consolidated. And so then we stopped at one place, and they said time to get something to eat. But Ariola, you stay with the tank. You watch the tank. Meantime, it started to rain, pouring rain, monsoon. And so here I am by myself, hungry, open up a can of rations, and rain pouring down, eat my rations. And that's all I remember then. And then finally we got to our place where we can rest. And so that's about what happened at one particular time. So is there any questions you want to ask me? Or
Yeah. How is it being inside of the tank in terms of weather, in terms of noise, in terms of heat?
This is what I can't understand. It's crowded. Maybe because I was short at the time, maybe that's why I was picked to be in a tanker. But anyway, there's not too much room left to manipulate around. Secondly, the noise factor. You know, you see pictures today of all these ear plugs you have and all that. In 1951, us tankers didn't have all the things they have today. And the noise is terrible. And I hear now, I have hearing aids now. After a few years, I was able to get them through the Army. But the noise was terrible, and there's not much room at all. Now they have bigger tanks. This M4 Sherman tank, it was a tank used during World War II. It was one of the fastest tanks we had. And today I used to, in those days, used to jump up and down the tank to get in and out. Today, I went to, in California, it was the, General, I can't think of his name. He was in charge of the 3rd Armored Division, General Patton.
Patton.
Right, General Patton, P-A-T-T-O-N,
yeah.
Sherman. He was the great general during in World War II that fought the Germans in the desert. And we're just driving along, and we see a big sign there that says General Patton's Museum. So my wife and I, we pulled over and stopped and went in there, and it brought back all the memories. In fact, they had in a corner, they had one of my tanks still there, and it was really exciting. It brought back all the memories. You see, people talk about being in the infantry, being this and being that. Have you ever talked to another tanker in your interview? Have you ever mentioned?
Yes.
You have mentioned tankers in the World Korean conflict.
Mm-hmm.
I never met one yet. It would be interesting to see what the stories they have. I was glad I was not in the infantry, because I couldn't dig a hole. And if I felt I was going to come back, and if I was going to get it, I was going to get it. I mean, it's very easy, a bazooka, and I'm gone. But being a tanker, you don't think about that. You're kept too busy. In other words, if the tank doesn't run, I'm dead. we had 45s we carried. You can't carry an M1 rifle in there. And 5 of us is like one. We all work together. And I enjoy being a tanker. People talk about infantry, and I know the Marines, they talk about this and they talk about that. But I enjoy being a tanker. And see, the thing that when I was drafted, I didn't know what was going to happen, what was being a tanker, being involved, who was I fighting for, what was I fighting for. All I heard was Korea, North Korea, South Korea. North Korea, I understand, I read back what happened in 19-something. Japan took over Korea. And what happened when Japan lost the war, the United States was given south of the 38th parallel, gave it to South Korea, and north of the 38th parallel was given to North Korea by the Russians. And in 1950 is when North Korea invaded South Korea. And so what I gathered the whole thing is that the South Korea wanted a way of freedom like United States, land of the free, home of the brave. North Korea wanted to be militarized. They wanted their own type of government. And the only thing that I appreciate in my heart is that the Korean veterans, what they did in Korea was to give South Korea that freedom part to do away from a military type of government. Also that, and the thing that I didn't like about the whole Korean conflict is that I don't think us Korean veterans, and to this day, we're not given the honor due to the Korean veterans. Back in about 10 or 12 years ago, the Korean delegate gave a luncheon for some Korean veterans, which I felt was very nice. Showed appreciation is what us Korean veterans did for the Korean people. And yet, I love America. I'll die for America. I kissed the ground when I came home from Korea, to kiss the ground and see what type of government we have and the freedom we have, and to appreciate the United States of America. And I don't, still to this day, I don't feel that we were given, 62 years ago, I was in Korea, and I don't feel that personally given a respect that, well, I don't mean we give us the world, the moon, and the sun, but just show us, thank you, Korean veterans, for what you did. And because people in those days didn't understand what we were going through. We lost over 35,000 soldiers in the Korean conflict for 3 years. And I admire President Eisenhower when he took office in 1953, and his first goal was to bring us soldiers back and to end this conflict. There was no winners then. It was just a peace treaty. And to this day is what, I'm going to point out one thing. When I was firing this tank, I thought that we were fighting the North Koreans. We were not. We were fighting the Chinese. Fighting the Chinese, I mean, you know, because when MacArthur went into, when he was given by Truman to go in there and stuff, we pushed the North Koreans all the way back to the Chinese border. And he wanted to go further into China. But Truman says, no, you come back here. And then that's when this war really began, because everyone's supplying this and that. You see what I'm getting at? In other words, it was not a war like World War II. Everybody knew there was a war going on. We had no television. We had hardly anything. So people here didn't know what was going on out there. What the South Koreans were going through and our soldiers going through, and how many people we lost. So I was proud to serve in the Korean conflict. I really was, and I was proud. In fact, I belong to a support group here. It's mental health support group, and Dave and Jimmy and a couple from World War II and us, we have discussions and all that. And it's helped us on the PTSD. In other words, what I'm saying is that we think about it. You say, well, how come you think about it now? But when we got out, we didn't have all these VA satellite places you can go to talk to. In other words, it's a VA where people you can go and talk to. Only just now, so 62 years later, we have a VA hospital, we have all this. If you have a problem, you can meet the people and talk about this, there, and that. When you get out of service, that all you do is you leave the service and you go get a job and you work. I supported a family. I have a son who served in Somalia. I have a daughter that is in the medical field, and so I come from a family that served the country very well, and we appreciate the United States of America. I just hope that we don't have something happen in North Korea again and South Korea. That's something I wish will never happen. And I'm very happy to see pictures of South Korea. How nice they have big buildings out there and everything. Now, you might ask me, do I want to go back? Well, do I want to go back? Be honest with you, I really don't want to go back. I mean, I have nothing against the Korean people. I'm so happy that they're friendly. I know I'll never forget my memories there. I think the South Korean people are fantastic, and I'm so happy what they've done. They progressed in the world, and I drive a Korean car. I'm very pleased, and so I have, just that I just don't wish to go back.
Why?
It'll bring back memories for me, and I think about it. That's the thing now. I still think about Korea, which was a desolate country. In other words, didn't have anything with all the wars, and I imagine what they went through to rebuild and everything. But I just don't care to go back.
Too much for you to go back.
Too much to go
Right.
back.
Mm-hmm.
I want to remember what I went through, and I want to try to forget it. And I think the Korean people are a nice group of people, and I just so very happy that they're on their 2 feet now, and I just pray to God that nothing breaks out again out there. And
Had your tank been hit by
no,
never?
No, never been hit.
Oh.
We've had some dirt and all that stuff flying on top of it, and but that artillery did come pretty damn close, and I know that, and I was just lucky. You know, I just feel that I was lucky. But when I saw all those dead soldiers around me, I knew that artillery just come right at you, and I was just lucky that I didn't get hit. And
How was enemy tank?
they were at least half a mile away, I would say, 500 feet, 1,000 feet, away, and you fired at 75 millimeter, and mixing it, the tank just goes back like that, and I'm sure we did damage. I know we did damage, because we did a lot of firing back and forth, and we had tanks in our line also, and I'm sure we have. And we didn't see them.
Where did you sleep? You always move around, right?
Yeah,
But you didn't sleep inside of the tank.
well, we didn't sleep in the tank.
You didn't?
No.
Right. So where did you go to sleep?
Well, we had a little tents. We would get a tent and move around on the tank. Put a pinch of tent, where all our tankers would get ill and stay in this little. All our tankers would stay in this little tent, and then the next morning, because secondly, I don't know how the infantry did it, but the bugs were terrible. We used to have screens cover our tent, and one time I heard some kind of noise, and boy, I just slept all the way through it. I want to point out one thing, too. Every time it was guard duty, my name must have came up all the time. Ariola, Ariola. And I had guard duty all the time. And
Why is that?
I don't understand. I was just doing that. They just called me for guard duty. And one time I hit my, we didn't have an M1. We had it's the smaller rifle. One night, as I'm parading around my tank, here a guy approaches me, and I says, somebody approached me, and I said, advance and be recognized. Here was an officer. I'm ready to shoot him. And so he recognized who he was, and I let him through. And another time, I was on guard duty, and the guy in charge says, Ariola, you'll put 2 hours in there, and someone will relieve you. 2 hours went by, I never saw anybody. So Mr. Ariola here was 4 hours on guard duty. I couldn't leave. I didn't know who the guy was to relieve me, but the guy never came, and I was thinking about being tired. I sure was tired. And in closing, like I say, I have no qualms of being a tanker. I think it's a tough outfit. I was assigned to the 3rd Armored Division, which was General Patton's 3rd Armored Division. And like I say, if you heard of General Patton, and at the General Patton's Museum, which they talk about that General Patton's 3rd Armored Division trained over 100,000 tankers in California, in the Desert Springs over there, by Palm Springs. He had an area just for the tankers where he trained all these tankers.
What was the most difficult thing for you to remember?
Being alone, even though I was with the tankers, with very few people. You don't make friends. Like I said, even being with tankers, I never knew their names, never how we got along. I didn't know their, to this day, I don't remember their names. I don't remember one man's name.
You didn't know the name?
I know the names then, but after 62 years, I don't remember. But today, I know the tank. When I saw this tank, everything had all come back to me. And like I say, I felt I was alone, even though we had the tanks, we had the soldiers. But when you're there by yourself, you're on your own. There's no friends and all that. It's buddies, more or less, that do a job, and that's what we did. We did a job. But I felt, like I say, when I got there, I thought I wasn't going to come back. Be honest with you. And, you know, up to about 5 years ago, I never mentioned this to my family. They didn't know.
Why not?
Because I figured, why would they want to know? Feel sorry for me or know what I went through? I never, in fact, I might say I didn't have the time to tell them, but I was too busy raising the family, working to put them through school, working to make a living. And I did it after 62 years, but after about 5 years, when I was free, more or less, I was able to talk to them. Even to the last, I was able to bring my son to one of our support groups, and he never mentioned about what he went through in Somalia when he went on Black Hawk Down. You heard of that in 1992, and which he never opened up to me as a son, as a father, and never mentioned what he went through being in Somalia. So what I'm saying is veterans don't like to talk about it unless... I know you've probably never been in service. I don't know, right? Have you never been?
I was in the Air Force.
You was in the Air Force. Were you a combat veteran? And it's hard to explain when you talk to combat veterans and their stories. They don't talk about it unless you are in a support group like I am now. Because who was I going to talk to? I can talk to my family, never been in a combat situation. But listening to Jimmy, listening to Dave and Bob, who's World War II, a gentleman who jumped on June 5th, was day before D-Day, listening to their side of the stories, what they went through. So us veterans don't say, come on, I want to tell you a story about my life. We don't like to do that. I mean, it's not our nature to do that.
So you saw many dead bodies.
Yes.
Chinese, North Koreans, Americans?
Mostly Americans.
Mostly
Because
Americans?
the fire coming in on us. The fire coming, returned fire from the artillery or what else, their tanks, whatever they had, firing that to us.
So the infantry soldiers around the tank mostly got targeted.
Yes, from the artillery. And of course there's many that infantry was ahead of us, so I really couldn't see what they had, but I'm sure they encountered a lot of their own. I don't know why you heard of Park Chop Hill, and you heard about, you haven't heard Chawan, that's where the Old Baldy was, another hill. Whatever value they had, I don't understand, but that was where the Chinese were coming from, and which I can't understand why they say that. How come they were involved? I guess the only reason they were involved because we thought that we were going to invade them, and I think that was probably the reason. And I look back is that we lost so many soldiers, 35,000 of them, in the cold weather and in the hot weather. I'm sure Korea was a land where extreme weather, hot and cold. I wasn't there like when it got below zero. I was there when it was hot, and I was. Maybe they couldn't. Why they picked Korea? You know what I'm saying is why they picked on this country, but they did because of North Koreans.
When did you leave Korea?
In about November of '72, something like that.
52?
52.
November of 52.
Yeah.
So what did you bring out of the Korean War with you when you returned home?
What did I bring?
Yeah, in your mind, in your spirit, or?
I brought, I relived my whole time there. That's what I relived. All my time being in Korea, I relived that. The day I went on that ship, the day I went to Japan, and the day back on in Incheon, you know, I relived all that to this day. I remember everything 62 years ago. And you say, why do you remember that? Because it's hard for me to forget it. I wake up at night when I go to the washroom, and it takes me a good half an hour to fall asleep because I relive part of that. See, when you're working, you have a job, and you have a family, you don't think of those things. You hit that sack and you fall asleep. But now that I don't work, your children are married, it's just your wife and I, and we do things and all that, but I still, when I get up and have to go to the bathroom, and I relive that. Not all the time, but it does come back to me. I imagine they lived everybody else. I mean, probably they do the same thing. I don't know, but this is what I feel, that I can't forget Korea. I can't forget it.
How do you put the fact that you were there, you cannot forget about it, into a perspective in your life?
It was such an experience. I never had an experience like that in my life. I was never away from, I went to grade school, I went to high school, I went to work, and we never took trips. My wife, my mother and father and all that. Maybe I was 10, 11 years old, maybe we went somewhere, but we never went away from our Illinois or out of the country. And it's an experience for someone to leave the United States of America and go to a strange country. It's a new beginning. I don't know if you're away from Korea. I don't know, what is the first time when you leave your hometown and come to a strange new country? How do you feel? It's the food is different and all that. And I didn't stop at a restaurant in Korea and say, here's the K rations, here's the C rations. That's what I lived out of. I didn't have a cook like in some places they have a mess hall. You go there and get your meal, get your eggs and all that. I never got that. All I had when it was raining cats and dogs over there and I was hungry, I opened a can of whatever I was eating and the rain pouring down and I'm eating that because I was hungry. And I didn't say, hey, I don't want to stand guard duty. This is my job. I did my job, what I was told, and I was proud that I did my job. But like I say, it's a very experience. And if you've never been away from home, it's an experience. You have to get your food. You have to go to. You're hungry. You got to get in line, and you want to because you want to eat. You have to go to the bathroom. You can't say, you go to the bathroom with 10, 20, 30 other guys. You know what I'm saying? You're living a whole new experience in life. And to me, and I have a grandson who's 19. He had to register for draft. That's what I did when I was 18. I registered for the draft. And our place to draft was around the whole block. You sign your name and all that. Bam, when I was 21 years old, I got that, we want you. You know what I'm saying? And I'm saying it's an experience. I hope that, well, he had to do the same thing now, my grandson, he's 19. He signed, he's going to school and all that. But God forbid, I hope he's not drafted. If he has to, he has to serve his country. We all have to. And because I don't think we get enough volunteers. We have to have a defense. We have to have a good, ready army. We cannot be, like in World War II, be off guard and something like in Pearl Harbor to happen again. We have to be prepared. I'm saying be prepared.
Mm-hmm. Do you suffer from nightmare? Do you see those dead bodies in your night?
I do. One in particular, the one I was telling you about that he was digging, he looked up at me and I looked up at him. And that's the only thing I see. Still see his face. I see his picture of him. But I knew he was gone. But why I remember that in particular, because I just got him. He looked at me and I looked at him. That's how I remember it.
And then he died?
He died, yeah. When we opened up the hatch, I didn't see him anymore.
Did you know him?
No, I didn't know him. We didn't talk. I mean, normally you say hi, this and that. No, he didn't say a word. I didn't say a word. Because what can we say? You know, he was about maybe from here, I'd say 20 feet away from me. He was in his foxhole.
Do you still see his eye?
I see his face itself, the whole face. His eyes opened and looking at. I looked at as if we were to say hi and all that, but we never said a word.
Does that bother you?
Yeah, it does. It does. What I dream about is family. I dream of what is his family. You know, when I had my two brothers in service, and I think of my mother and father, especially my mother. She couldn't speak well English and all that, but I feel in my heart, I know what she was going through. My father's, it's different because he served in World War I, more or less. But then when my son was in Somalia, I feel the same way. In other words, I knew what my wife was going through, and me as being a veteran, I just keep it to myself because I know what he is going through, and I don't want to worry my wife any because it had to be, more or less. But that's what a parent goes through. Having a soldier or daughter in the service is not a very nice thing to have, but you have to go through it.
It was such a tragic war. You lost so many bodies, but it's never been really recognized well, as you made a point.
That's right.
And it's been regarded as a forgotten war. Why is that?
Because it wasn't televised more. It wasn't brought out. We had no television then. We didn't have newspapers that, or reporters that were out there capturing all the things that happened.
Yeah.
Now in Iraq, Afghanistan, every time you turn around, 10 soldiers were
But
dead, 15 soldiers were dead.
But compared to the World War II, which occurred before the Korean War, and it was well known to,
Sure.
and well remembered and well recognized,
Right.
why not Korean War?
I don't know why. That's why I can't understand. I think the people in higher up, whether it's the senators, the government, or whatever it is, didn't recognize, our president didn't recognize what it is to have someone over there and know what's going on. He did not recognize it, Truman. It's been in the history books. We read it. When he answered that question, in fact, the question was on Jeopardy. What did President Truman say? It's not a war. It's a forgotten war. Well, hell, no, it's a police action. I told my wife, it's police action. That's what I'm trying to bring out. If it was a full-scale war, like Vietnam, you take Vietnam now, right? Well, you talk to people, let me finish now. I went to this PTSD class, okay? I had the instructor talking about everything. He's mentioning all the wars, right? World War I, World War II, what have you. And then he says Vietnam. He never mentioned the Korean War. And I was about ready to raise my hand, but I figured, Vince, be quiet. Be quiet. How do you think I feel when 35,000 soldiers died and didn't recognize the Korean War? I was more in my PTSD. But I was going to say that, and I didn't know how many Korean vets were in this room when they're talking about it, but I was about ready to. My wife said, no, sit down. No. I was going to say, excuse me, sir, you didn't mention the Korean War. Wouldn't you gotten up? I mean, to feel that I put my life on stake and you didn't mention the Korean War?
What do you think is the legacy of the Korean War and Korean War veterans?
I think the Korean War veterans are very, very nice hospital people. I went through a doctor at one of the hospitals, and I came out after seeing my regular doctor, and it was a Korean vet in a wheelchair, more or less. So when I came out, because I had my hat on, and he had his hat on, Korean War, he put his hand out right like this, and I put my hand out right, because we recognize each Korean vet as a veteran. That's my legacy, is that we respect each other. I didn't ask him what he did or what branch or what kind of service it was, with infantry, this and that, but we shook hands because we were comrades. We were friends. I know what he went through, and he probably doesn't know what I went through. But we wear that hat with pride that we are Korean veterans, combat veterans. I'm not saying that everyone does a part. I mean, no, everyone doesn't have to be a combat veteran in Korea, but each one has a part of being there, helping out.
Yes.
And whether you're a cook, whether you're a medic and all that, everyone had a job to do, and that I respect, and I appraise all of them that served in Korea, no matter what branch and what you did. Whether you're a Marine, Army, Navy, or whatever it is, I appreciate what service they've done serving in Korea.
Do you have grandchildren or great-grandchildren in the age of high school or the college?
I have this boy that I can say he just finished high school. He's 19 and he's going to university in August. And if he is able to go into service, I don't know, but time will tell. I have a granddaughter is going into the second year of high school. And I have another little grandson who's only 9, and he's in his 3rd grade of grade school. And I have another grandson who is going to be 15 or 14, and he's graduating from grade school.
I invite them to the Washington, D.C. so that they can keep your legacy.
I see. Well, I'll talk to my wife.
Any other message you want to leave to this interview?
Well, in closing, I'm very pleased that I'm happy that the Koreans have freedom now, and what I did was a small part of giving them back their freedom that they so well deserve against this North Korean conflict. And I'm happy that I was able to do something, play a part that they have this freedom now, which started back in 1950, and I hope it lasts forever, that nothing happens again the conflict in Korea. And I'm very pleased with the South Korean people and what they've done and the progress they've made in rebuilding their country.
Thank you so much again for your fight and your suffering. But because of that, we are here. And as you mentioned, in order for us to keep your legacy and make this war remembered in the minds of the people, we need to activate your grandchildren.
Okay. All right.
Ask them to contact me.
Okay.
They're going to learn how they're going to do interview the local Korean War veterans so that they can send me like this. And then they're going to work on the American history textbook, which has a very short coverage of the Korean War.
What you're saying is exactly what I was trying to convey to you. Exactly. Is to keep that the South Korean legacy going.
Yeah.
And you recognize what we've done for you people, and that's the whole thing that I wanted to bring out. Thank you, and I appreciate it, and I see someone that really appreciates and what we've done, what we try to do for you, Korean, and recognize it, and that's all I wanted was recognition that thank you for what you're doing.